Donald Trump did something this week that is making the Russians very, very happy. Now, I realize that may not narrow it down very much, but I'm talking about their national security strategy just released. Take a listen.
Tonight, Russia is welcoming President Trump's new U.S. national security strategy, calling it largely consistent with Moscow's, quote, vision.
So why are the Russians thrilled with this? Because this document, which sets out our national security strategy, closely aligns with Moscow. This is what Moscow says. It closely aligns with their vision. Imagine that, America's national security strategy in close alignment with the Kremlin dictator. In fact, if the national security document had a theme song or credits, it would probably look a lot like this. So these national security strategy reports come out periodically. They have ever since 1987. In 1986, Congress passed this requirement so that the president would essentially inform the country and the Congress, here's who our enemies are, here's who our friends are, here's our priorities, here are the threats, here's how we're going to meet the threats. And this document got so much attention because it's such a radical departure from those that went before, even very different than the national security strategies in the first year of the first Trump administration. Here's a little bit of reaction to this report.
This is the first MAGA national security strategy.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump and his advisors view the ideal situation as a world composed of not democratic countries, but authoritarian ethno-states.
The U.S. military has, for decades, protected Europe. Now, the Trump administration's national security strategy seems to spell an end to all that.
So there are four notable takeaways from this national security strategy. The first is the one I started with, and that is it is very, very pro-Putin. It is also very dismissive of Ukraine. And of course, this is not a surprise given how this administration has so often betrayed Ukraine. Indeed, the priority in this document is to end the war in Ukraine, and it would seem like their priority is to end it in any way, including by giving Russia everything it wants. They also spell out in this document another reason for Russian celebration, that the Trump administration doesn't want to see any further expansion of NATO. So the whole idea in the past that NATO membership is dictated by NATO countries, that those who want to be part of NATO, part of this very important national security alliance, can petition to join NATO, but it's up to NATO whether they become members or not. We are now essentially ceding that permission to Moscow. If Moscow doesn't want a country in NATO, then we are saying we're not going to expand NATO. That is a dramatic change and a destructive one, because that NATO alliance has been so important for post-war security ever since the end of World War II. So, number one, top takeaway, Russia, we are in alignment with you, according to Donald Trump. The second big takeaway is a major American retreat from the rest of the world. This is a document that would make America small by reinstating the Monroe Doctrine. So the Monroe Doctrine would essentially carve up the world into different spheres of influence. And our sphere of influence, instead of being much of the world, by dint of our promotion of our ideas and by dint of our military and diplomatic strength, our world would shrink to the Americas. So we would essentially have control over South America, Central America, North America, and we would basically cede the rest of the world to, well, to China and to Russia and to other powers. So this is a major retreat for the United States. It does explain why Donald Trump has brought so much of our naval power to Venezuela, of all places. We're surrounding Venezuela, it feels, with the largest warship in the world, the USS Gerald Ford, with many other naval vessels, with air platforms. The president is threatening to go beyond boat strikes and killing survivors of shipwreck to attacking land targets. We just seized an oil tanker that came from Venezuela. So this is part of this doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine, that we're essentially going to run the Americas. It calls for no bid contracts with countries in Central and South America. That is, America first, you give us the contracts, or maybe we'll send our ships your way. This is implicit in this strategy document. Now, who are the big winners in that? China is a very big winner in this. It means drawing our focus away from the South Pacific, the South China Sea, what would now, I guess, become China's sphere of influence. It relegates our relationship to Taiwan to one of commercial advantage or disadvantage. What does this affect our sales of semiconductor chips, and how will it affect us in this way or that way? Whether Taiwan is invaded, whether Taiwan remains a democracy, that all gets sacrificed, it would appear in this document, on the altar of commerce and spheres of influence. Let's take a look at the Biden national security strategy and what it said about China, and compare it to what Donald Trump has to say about China. The PRC, by contrast, is the only competitor with both the intent to reshape the international order and increasingly the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to advance that objective. And compare that to the Trump document, which has this to say. Going forward, we will rebalance America's economic relationship with China, prioritizing reciprocity and fairness to restore American economic independence. So basically, if we can make some deals, then we're happy to abandon our allies in the region, whether that means Japan or South Korea, whether that means Taiwan or the Philippines. Good luck, because we are just going to be very transactional, and this is not our sphere of influence. The third big takeaway involves Europe, and most specifically, it involves an attack on Europe. It involves a national security document that says essentially that Europe is at risk of civilizational erasure. Now, what does this document mean by that? Well, it means that, according to the Trump administration, Europe is going to be dramatically weakened because of migration. It's going to lose its character, meaning, I suppose, it's going to lose its whiteness. But this document, this expression, this antipathy towards Europe was summed up by one European legislator as placing America in alignment, not with the far-right parties in Europe, but to the right of the far-right parties in Europe. It is dismissive of Europe. It is disdainful of Europe. It is disdainful of our important allies in Europe. It essentially says Europe is finished, and we're not particularly interested in Europe unless European countries all elect far-right, alt-right leadership in those nations. And finally, the fourth takeaway, and one of the most significant takeaways in the Trump National Security Strategy document, is democracy doesn't matter. Now, maybe this shouldn't surprise us, but the basic premise, and it runs really through all the sections of this document, is quid pro quo. We are now going to be completely transactional. It's going to be just about making money. We don't really care about anything else. We're not going to encourage countries to move in a more democratic direction. We're not going to support civil society organizations or free speech. None of those things that are such an imposition to dictators everywhere. Most particularly, this section is directed to the Gulf, where the administration is saying, we're not going to quarrel with your human rights record, not if there are crypto deals to be made, not if there's money to be gained for the president's family or for anyone else for that matter. But it's also a commentary on Russia. We're not going to have anything adverse to say about Russian dictatorship, about the Russian people and their aspirations. No, we're done in the democracy promotion business. Now, it's one thing to say we don't want to go to war as we did in Iraq with some mission of promoting democracy. But it's another thing to say that democracy and human rights are no longer a priority for the United States of America. This makes our country so small. This takes away what is really special about America. In fact, it is very consistent with what J.D. Vance had to say at the very beginning of this administration.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within.
So J.D. Vance talking about the threat within brought me back 8 years to the first Trump administration, the first year of that administration, when I likewise went to Munich for the security conference. I went as part of a congressional delegation led by John McCain, who I admired greatly. And at that conference, literally on the way to that conference, Donald Trump for the first time described the American press as the enemy of the people. I went out to dinner that night with John McCain and other members of the delegation, and we were treated to being in the company of Bono, that amazing musician. And as the evening wore on and we ate and we had something to drink and we started telling jokes, I remember Bono telling a joke about Ireland and being Irish. And then he got very serious and he said, I'm very proud of Ireland. I'm very proud to be Irish. But Ireland, like most countries, is just a country. He said, America is also an idea. And I remember feeling at that moment that this was really what was at stake in this first Trump administration, the very idea of America, the very idea that America was a special country, an indispensable country. And we were special and indispensable because we weren't simply and alone looking out for our interests, but we were looking out for human rights and democracy. We were supporting freedom-loving people all around the world, whether it was journalists in prison cells in Turkey, whether it was political prisoners in Evin prison in Iran, people in Tibet, or anyone around the world looking for an ally in the cause of freedom. They looked to America. They looked to America. And this was what I was so concerned at the time we were going to lose in that first Trump administration. And now we flash forward to today when matters are so much worse, when we have a document that pretty much spells out exactly that. That is the end of the idea of America as something beyond a purely transactional country like any other. And that to me is really the tragedy and the biggest takeaway from the national security strategy that the Trump administration just put out and this really bleak path they have set this country on. So thanks for watching tonight's video. We started doing these nightly videos as a way of identifying something really important that happened today or this week, what we should make of it, and how we can fight back. As you can see, I like to include movie clips. If you have any suggestions for other movie clips I should include in future videos, please share them with us. And thank you for following along.